recorded live.
And welcome. Thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 Radio Show, and I'm your host, Daniel Davis. It seems that in a world that we seem to explore this day and age, when you hear it in mass media, that there seems to be just no abundance left for anybody. Everybody's out reaching to get a piece of the pie, only they can't even find the pie pan. What is it that prevents us from getting everything that we desire and want in our lives? Is there some underlying force that's working against us? Well, joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today is our guest, Dr. Joe Gallenberger. He is a clinical psychologist with more than 30 years of experience as a therapist, so it's fair to say that he's probably seen all the patterns you can consider when people come in and they talk about ways that they can actually manifest abundance in their own lives, and they just can't seem to do it no matter how much self-help they read. He also has a great interest in the universal principles of manifestation. In 1995, he began exploring psychokinesis, which is the ability to influence matter through non-physical means. He has achieved powerful results and teaches this skill to people who have an interest in manifestation. Today we're going to be talking about those wonderful, rascally, wily enemies that keep us from the things that we want in our lives, the enemies of abundance, and how to conquer them. And I'd like to welcome to the program Dr. Joe Gallenberger. Dr. Joe, thank you for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program.
Thank you for having me, Daniel. How are you doing today?
Oh, doing pretty good. It seemed that we had a little abundant lack happening earlier as we tried to get the show going, and something stopped us, one of them weird mystical forces. But let's talk about that for a minute, why people, they work at setting goals, writing down goals, the things they would like to see happen in their lives, but for some reason something just continually blocks them from being able to have what it is they want. What do you think happens there?
Well, I think there can be many things operating, and might as well just title them enemies of abundance, sort of saboteurs that could be there. Those things can span a gamut of things, from worry or shame or impatience or depression, avoidance, but most of them have in common an element of fear and then a belief system or in a pattern of thinking that's not constructive, that's limiting.
I know that as we talked last time, we were talking about that it's one of those kind of mirrors, you turn it just right and you see things in such a different way, and you thought, I've never thought about it that way before. And so when you talk about beliefs built around fear, it seems fair enough that that's what people actually go out and seek without being aware of it.
That can be there, and in fact, not only can it block abundance creation, but it can manifest exact opposite of what you would like, kind of the phrase, fear is a prayer for what you do not want. I can give you an example. Over 10 years ago when I was going through a divorce, every appliance in my home started breaking. Dishwashers, clothes washers, garage door openers, shavers, all kinds of things. And then I realized, I'm in a state of fear about the future, and I'm thinking broken home. And the appliances were taking me up on it, if you will, and I was creating that kind of breakage. Once I realized that, then I changed my thinking to I'm creating a new life, settled down, shed the fear, and probably half of them repaired themselves, and no more breakage happened. So how you think and the emotions you tie to it, in my opinion, are highly important.
I know it's interesting because I think people, even myself, have experienced the fact that it seems that we struggle sometimes to get what we want or where we want to be.
Yeah.
And then you see others where it just seems to just kind of fall in their lap, and you kind of wonder, okay, so what am I missing here?
Yes. There's it can be hard not to compare yourself to others when you
Exactly.
There's an interesting book called The Outliers that kind of explodes the myth of it falling into people's laps. When you look at Bill Gates and pro hockey players and sports players and things, they've usually put in at least 10,000 hours of effort before things pay off. So that's one thing. We have a myth in America sometimes of, you wake up one morning and it can be there.
Like overnight success or instant success, exactly.
But there's sort of a difference. For example, in my life one time I wanted to go to Paris, and I thought, gee, that'd be nice. And I got an email the next day to do a workshop training in Paris, and my wife and I went quite smoothly. The reason that went smoothly, I think my energy tends to be high anyway, and I practice what I preach in terms of manifesting, but that there was no negative pattern in the way. Where other things, like if I said I want $1 billion, my dad used to say, "Oh, big money would ruin you guys,"
Oh.
and things like that. So our training about deservingness, about what is an obscene amount of money and what's enough, what's a good amount of money, all those kind of things can come in, and people have different cards they're dealt with that way. So for somebody, it does fall quite easily, but usually what will happen is you'll see something falls easily, fame or money or what have you, but usually there's still something, relationships, for example, that they may struggle with. It's very unusual to be across the board 4 aces or 5 aces in terms of everything important in life goes easily.
Mm-hmm.
But looking at somebody, you can think that. You can go, gee, they got it made, And that doesn't help our own creation if we just get into that.
I know that from time to time here on the program that we have talked with, call them expert network marketers, and having been to meetings myself where you see success celebrated in the face of others, and then sort of the stories, well, they've been on board 3 months and they've realized this kind of a success, or they've been on board 6 months, and then you got the poor guy sitting in the audience, I've been doing this 3 years. What am I missing here?
Yeah. Uh-huh. And part, of course, in there can be when you join the chain in the marketing, but the previous networks people had, the level of confidence, many different things could be there. But if they're dealing with fear in the form of some of the kinds of things that I've mentioned, it's very, very difficult to manifest in a way where it stays steady and just continues to grow. So from my point of view, you really got to deal with that fear. And many wealthy people have a lot of fear that it's going to just all be taken away the next day.
Mm-hmm.
At least they don't enjoy themselves as much as they could, and at most that fear may be fulfilled at some point.
Now, you mentioned earlier about 10,000 hours. Kind of elaborate on that a little bit, because I know that when we've talked with other guests, when it comes to success, and there's that illusion that some cases it's overnight. You might even hear that in music. Oh, this person's an overnight success. Then you realize, well, they've been in the music business for 15 years. And
it just take the example of the Beatles. They went to Germany and ended up playing in these outdoor clubs where they played, instead of like an hour-long concert, they played for more than 8 hours a day. And they put in their 10,000 hours before they ever reached any level of success and fame, for example. Yet it seems like they sprang from nothing,
Mm-hmm.
So that would be an example of that. Again, it can be very helpful to have that kind of practice and opportunity, and some of the manifestation skill would be to be in the right place at the right time, so you would get an offer to put in your practice hours, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're thinking in the enemy's abundance way, that, no, who me, I don't deserve it, or nothing good ever happens to me, or gee, I want it tomorrow, I'm too impatient to wait. All of those things do act like enemies. They may get in the way of what good the universe might want to send to you. But most good that's sent requires your cooperation a bit, so that you put in your efforts and you take your risks financially, you put in your time, and then you might see the results that you're wanting.
Now, what is it that we do? It almost seems like an autopilot or auto response when we move into this feeling of, I don't deserve this, or that's for somebody else, but not for me. It's almost like a self-righteous, self-defeating attitude, if you will. Where does that come from?
Well, I think you can come by it honestly in many different ways, but I think many ways in our parents' attempt to teach us modesty and to teach us to be grateful for what we do have, they don't get too big ahead, or that there was much more of a class system when they came up in their upbringing often, so they would tend to discourage too big a dream because you might be disappointed at times. So we can get that, but Also, any guilt that we have can make us feel we don't deserve the good. So most of us have done a few things we're not proud of by the time we're 20 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So concepts of that can get in there, and it almost forms like a big dirty snowball. You can fear produces all these different manifestations of it. Shame, I think, is one of the hardest in terms of low vibration, and it's very hard to manifest things if you feel somewhat shame. And people, say, "Oh, I have no shame." I say, "Well, can you think of anything you would like to not tell, would not want to tell your mother, for example, that you've done in your life? And if there is anything on that list, that's probably something that you hold some shame about."
I know that there. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, you talk about shame, other things that you can see that could be enemies are things like worry, greed, and patience. Procrastination, now there's a big one, especially when it comes to me. I think I'm working on it, but you wonder, why do you put things off instead of just taking the action to get it done?
Mm-hmm. And again, I would put that in there as another manifestation, usually of fear. If you had a total confidence that you could get it done easily without problem, and it would be highly successful, usually you wouldn't put it off. But say you were going to write a book someday and you kept putting it off, it might be, again, because of the fear of how much work it would be to whether it would be a success or a failure. Sometimes, on that list is depression. If our energy just is low, and in our society there's so much stress that a lot of us, our energy is low, it can be you don't have the energy to start it. Procrastination is a favorite, I think, of a lot of people to just avoid.
Mm-hmm. Now, does that actually spring from something else, or is it just that?
Again, I would talk about usually people who do not procrastinate have had a good history already of successful completion of things easily, with help from other people becoming available synchronistically, a good flow to things. So they have a confidence when they approach something, and they've felt the reward of completion. Folks that can procrastinate often years of how much effort and what else will have to be sacrificed, in whatever way you might look at it. The whole quantity of fear, summary of fear, might be larger than the imagined benefit that they can imagine at that moment. If they get going, then all of a sudden they might be able to feel that benefit at the end much more vividly, and they get rolling and they do okay. But initially it might just look like, having to shovel 17 inches of snow off a driveway or something. Sure, you don't want to start it.
Exactly, and then it just wears on you as it sits there in your face saying, "You want to just get me done?"
And then you get the shame going, and you get the depression going about it, and you get, all of that going too.
Now, most of these, as you were explaining earlier, these different things, whether it's greed or shame, impatience, cynicism, depression, procrastination, as we've been talking about, are fear-based. So are these kind of, I guess, call them protectors of that fear? They sort of like validate that the fear is real and that it should be protected? Is that what's going on here?
I think they interact. You have some fear, and then one of these begins, like, say, impatience. I got to get it now because I'm afraid I might not get it, type of thing, and that circles back into even more fear. I think how you would, what's most important is, what do you deal with it? If you look at it as having a common base of fear, then it may have a common solution, which I think it does. So whether it is worry or greed or shame or impatience or procrastination, I think one of the most powerful things you could do would be apply love to that situation, because to me, love is the opposite of fear, and it could bring in the positive energy needed for a real good, positive abundance creation. So regardless of how the fear manifests, And rather than get bogged down into, a lot of descriptive detail of that, of how am I feeling at that moment, if you can just be aware of, some manifestation of fear is running, so let me apply relaxation techniques, let me apply things to open my heart, let me apply things that bring me into a more loving state, and probably most of the fear will just melt away.
It seems so simple, but yet it seems difficult for us to actually move in that direction. So what would you say, you were just kind of giving some of the magic formula to get rid of these different manifestations of fear. So let's talk about what that is specifically, that magic formula, if you will.
Okay, well, again, like you say, it seems simple, but I'd say the bad news is it requires a good deal of self-awareness just to figure out when you are in fear. It's tempting to blame somebody else if things are going wrong rather than look at yourself. And then a good deal of dedication and hard work. I think the good news is that process of healing the fears can be one of the most exciting adventures that we can take in our lives. And the better news is we can also often see positive results quite quickly if we use the proper tools. And again, as I mentioned, probably the best news is love can indeed move mountains of fear away. And us love energy more directly, it can provide us with the miracles of healing needed to deeply transform some of those old limits that may have been running all the way from childhood. So I used to say I meet fear with courage. Now I say I melt fear with love. It's just a lot easier than going into battle.
That's an interesting point of view, because I know that if I've done many shows over the years, especially when it comes to chronic illness, things such as cancer, terminal illnesses, people who have written books about this, and some of the striking things that I've found in their language was really quite unique when you talk about facing your enemy or your fear with love, that love can move mountains, especially mountains of fear. And one of the books was about 4 women who had each different religious faiths and different stages of their experience with cancer, and they called themselves cancer initiates. In other words, they were saying, the idea of the war on cancer, we have to defeat cancer, as though this is this battle or this war, there was this enemy that came and we're one-on-one with it and it needs to be defeated. Their attitude was one of, no, we're being initiated into things that we have overlooked in our lives that need to be faced, and this cancer is a special gift that's trying to show us what we've been missing. Is that something that makes sense in the context of what we're talking about?
I think very much so. And some of it can be by personality and where a person is in their life, so that it may be at certain times very valid to use the warrior image against the cancer. But underneath that, there's a self-love, no matter what the outcome. And I've also seen people work extremely effectively with illness when, rather than using a battle or a warrior image, they use one that is more of this idea of initiation, where they hold themselves in love and they hold even the cancer in respect that this is something that's come along to me as kind of a dark gift, and I'm going to use it for my benefit.
For those of you just tuning in, we're talking with Dr. Joe Gallenberger about those little enemies, or big enemies, if you will, that show up in case you happen to be someone trying to pursue an abundant life that makes you happy and fulfilled, but you seem to have those blocks in the way, and what we can do about it. Now, as we talk about serious illness, it's interesting because you'll find family and friends rally around you, but yet when it comes to financial loss, you lose your home, you lose your car, you lose your job. You certainly do this alone, it seems like. You'll get condolences, but that's about it. What's going on here? Because those things seem easier to repair than a sickness does.
Yeah, it is. We're now, as a culture, many people have lost half their retirement in the stock market and seen their house values go down by a substantial amount, and maybe even lost their job on top of it. And often when that type of thing happens in our culture, other people do avoid you like the plague, like contagious. And that can produce that type of shame and isolation, which are some of these enemies of abundance. We fear we've done something wrong because these things have been removed. And it's hard to generate the support and get the tools that you might if you were facing a cancer, for example. So it very much, to have a support team to go through those times is priceless. And there are indeed tools out there that could be very helpful to you to turn that around. The first reactions are very natural: depression, anger, shame, worry about the future if you had all that financial loss. But you need to move out of that and address these things with more than just a stiff upper lip and by yourself, but get support and get some tools and change your energy.
It's interesting. I'm sure you have worked with people who have been in that particular kind of loss. Let's say that they could be in their 40s and they lose their job and eventually their savings dwindle. And I'm sure that the conversations probably in their head are, God, I'm 40-something years old. How come I can't keep it together? What's going on here? So you can see how the shame comes in play here. So what I'm hearing you say, I believe, is you suggest that you kind of sit in that and then move forward through that and then find and create the resources that'll move you to where you want to be, that shame and that depression is all going to be there. But how does a person actually face that with love to help heal that so that they can move forward and get rid of that enemy that's blocking them, so to speak?
Well, hopefully, they have a modicum of self-love to begin with that they can then remind themselves of, that their worth is not based on whether they have a job or not. And hopefully they can have a set of friends or family that they could go to and say, I need some support. This thing has really rocked my world, losing this job, and my fears are mounting as my bank account dwindles, and get some support. If they know no one that way, they may even try it through a professional coach or group kinds of support situations. I guess we should have a Fear Anonymous group like we have Alcoholics Anonymous, where people could just go and receive some support. That, it'd be natural to be under fear in these circumstances, but let's remember what's really important. Let's marshal resources. Let's generate positive energy and get going again. But give the person a chance to grieve a little bit. They've had a loss.
Yeah, we just had a program a few weeks ago that was talking about grief recovery. And it was interesting to read through the book because you start to realize all the ways that we suffer loss. Most people think it's either a loss of a loving relationship or a loss of a loved one or a friend through death, but there were all these other little losses that can add up to really big fears over time, as they say, if you don't properly grieve and then you're able to move forward. These were people that have been experts in the field of grief recovery or grief loss for more than 30 years as well. And I read through this book and I thought of the possibilities of how that just can open you up to a whole new way of experience and being, because you're now no longer containing these things, but you're sort of dealing with the fact this happened, there's nothing you can do with it. You recover from the loss, so therefore you don't have to look into the future thinking it's going to happen again, and it snaps you back into the present. And I know that in your experience that this present moment is one of the most valuable, if not the most valuable things that we have.
Yes, that's the present moment, the place of where we really can create positive abundance from, and fear tends to flick us either into the future worry or the past, we're not in the present anymore, and in a way we're kind of not in body, if you will, and we're going to have a hard time getting our energy focused to create something new.
Now, you have worked with a company called Monroe Products, and you developed a home study course called Syncreation. We talked about this before. I'd like you to go ahead and talk with our audience about what Syncreation is and how this is a very real possibility that people can actually clear those phantoms that keep them locked in the past while trying to live into the future.
Well, again, this comes from the idea of knowing can be hard work, and it's good to have the right tools and to have really good support. So the Syncreation course is a course that's a home study course about manifesting the abundance and healing you want in your life. And A couple of the unique features about it is it uses a bunch of brainwave patterning exercises called hemisync that you listen to on CDs, and they are very powerfully able to change states of consciousness. So that, say, for example, if you were worried and you put this on in 10 minutes or so, you should be able to feel very, very relaxed, which is going to be much more useful to you. And the course teaches you how to remove emotional blocks and limiting beliefs that impair actualizing your dreams. My subspecialty, if you will, is psychokinesis, this idea of affecting matter with your mind, bending spoons and throwing dice and patterns, growing seeds in your hands. And I've found that that's the same energy you need to manifest, and it's a great feedback device. So we use the psychokinesis stuff as training. And the course includes 3 sessions of personal mentoring with an individual working with you on your own individual issues, an internet forum that's international, so you have a loving and supportive community to encourage you along your way. And I think most important, the course is based on the wisdom and energy of the heart to create abundance for all, including yourself. So it's a path that increases your love, and it's positive for spiritual growth. That's some of what that course is about.
So you could really see how, even though we tend to reach outside for the tools, the things that can help us create miracles in our own lives, that the truth is these tools are nothing but tools that help you unlock something that you truly already have inside of yourself, as you said, the wisdom of the heart.
Yes, and they can very much help you increase your awareness and raise your energy when you've been kind of down, and help you identify and let go of limiting emotions and beliefs, and a lot of times through both a raising of energy and at the same time doing visualizations, etc., and help you stay inspired to reach success, give you markers so that you know you're making some progress, because it's pretty tough to just put in effort after effort, day after day, say, to find a new job, if that in that person's example we mentioned before, and not be getting any feedback about rejection letters. Have markers that show, yes, I got my foot further in the door, my resume looks better, my energy's better, and see some progress before the final Beatles breakthrough, and now they have the big contract and they're famous. They needed feedback along the way.
And it's amazing, too, because we seem to live at times in a society that promises us this is quicker, this is easier, this is better. And actually, it's funny because, in a way, it does happen faster than you think, but not in the context as they would have you believe.
I firmly, the course is designed so if it can be easy, it'll be easy and fast. We've had people have things happen within days of getting the course. But on something where you're correcting a lifelong pattern of negativity in one form or another, it's probably going to take a little longer unless you get really lucky. But you can feel different quite quickly, and you can see progress quickly, so that you don't get discouraged. That's what's important, and then you'll get there.
Well, and you say a key point, too. It's how much time you actually put into doing a thing versus just hoping it's going to happen naturally. I remember many years ago reading in a book that this person wanted to become a better public speaker, so he took a look, for instance, at how many times he was actually speaking in public and realized on average he was giving about 2 public speaking speeches a month. He says, what I need to do is increase the frequency of that. And that's pretty much what you're talking about as well, isn't it?
Yeah, the practice part on many of these things can really come in handy. But if your energy is positive and high, then the opportunities come along for those speaking engagements with the perfect audience for you to stretch yourself and to give you good positive reinforcement and things. If your fears are primarily dominating, then you might get an offer to speak and you get there and there's nobody there, or they're very disinterested in your topic, or you begin with negative feedback.
Yeah, like throwing lettuce in cans and get them out of here.
Yeah, so that you want to make it so that you get all that synchronicity working in your favor.
Oh, that's wonderful. So why don't you go ahead, if you will, and tell people how they can find out more about Syncreation and HemiSync in general, and what that could do for people who are listening today.
Sure. Well, I do have a website, and it's www. and sync, S-Y-N-C, and then the word creation, C-R-E-A-T-I-O-N. So that's SYNC-CREATION.com. And it's also a toll-free number there, which is 888-613-6509. General Monroe Products catalog, they have probably 200 titles of things using these brainwave patternings that can help you, is www.hemisync.com. That's HEMI-SYNC.com. That's where Monroe Products can be reached. I'd love to hear from you either on the Syncreation.com or the hemisync.com.
Well, Dr. Joe Gallenberger, it's always a pleasure to have you on the program. There's a certain calm knowingness that you have that makes me feel just as confident about the listeners tuning in that this is a very real possibility for them to move into the direction they've always desired. And thank you again for taking the time to be in our program.
You're most welcome, Daniel. I've enjoyed our 3 sessions together. I hope we get a chance to talk again sometime or meet in person.
I certainly guarantee it. That's for sure. Thank you again.
Okay, bye-bye.
And for those of you just tuning in, we've been talking with Dr. Joe Gallenberger on the enemies of abundance and how to conquer them. And you can be sure to download this episode and pass it on to friends if they happen to be experiencing those frustrations of why can't I just get what it is I want. It takes some work and it takes some time and patience, but sometimes things will happen faster than you can imagine if you just point yourself in the right direction with the proper tools. We want to thank you for tuning in. You've been listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis, and I encourage you to visit our website at beyond50radio.com and sign up for our free weekly e-newsletter, and that is Beyond50, the number 50 with a 50, radio.com. Again, thank you for tuning in. I'm Daniel Davis, and remember, live your day past halfway.